Okay, it's 1:05, so I'm gonna go live.
Something Tuesday.
That's the word.
It's
been an age.
Yeah.
Okay, we're live for another Tech Talk.
Okay.
And I think everybody's very tired, so this one might get a little weird, but that's okay.
Great
That's okay.
disclaimer.
Yeah, it's gonna be weird and that's all right. And also we don't have like a big live on Zoom audience on this one. And I kind of get it because the topic of group projects is kind of a tough one, right? I think people have strong opinions, usually negative strong opinions about group projects. So they may not be super into coming on here live and sharing all their opinions about it. That's okay. Because what we wanted to do was kind of similar to what we did with discussion boards last quarter, kind of deconstruct some of the pitfalls and problems that we perceive with group projects. And then based on that, see if we can articulate some best practices, saying, well, if these are all the problems, what are the solutions, or at least what are the practices that can avoid some of those pitfalls? And we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, no, well said, well said.
So, as before, I think what we wanted to do was just kind of start building out a list of some of the problems, some of the bad experiences with group projects. And if anybody wants to join us live on Zoom and contribute, they certainly can. But also we can just fill some of this out ourselves and kind of talk through it, I think.
Yeah, I feel like between the three of us, we kind of, not to toot our own horns, but a wealth of experience just from seeing what all our instructors have been dealing with.
Yeah, seeing what other people on our two campuses are dealing with, but also our own experiences teaching and doing group projects, and our own experiences as students taking group projects.
Yeah, I was gonna say, surely we've all experienced terrible group projects as
Yeah.
students, right?
Which,
I mean-
yeah, it's an unfortunate common theme.
Right.
Well, it is, but my experience and the lesson that I always took from group projects as a student was trust no one.
Mhm.
Like that's
Yes. I agree.
that's the thing is and like that would be my first sticky note is trust no one.
Yes.
The
Okay.
fear of everyone else in your group slacking off, not contributing, and then you're left in the lurch. And maybe if there's a better way to articulate that, Nick, feel free.
I think
Maybe
that's a strong start.
maybe I'll align that with like the John McClane approach.
Okay, explain that.
So as a student, you know, nobody's doing the work, so now I have to be the one to completely go full bore and do everything. Like I feel like for me, like when I was in group projects, that was kind of how I kind of run it. It would be either, you know, somebody's taken the lead and now it's their baby and they control it, or nobody's doing anything, so the person with the most motivation to get a good grade or the least barrier will just kind of take it and do it.
Yeah.
So it kind of feels like that aligns.
Yeah, definitely. So maybe a more of academic way to say that would be inequitable distribution of labor. Oh, I wasn't gonna.
I
want
feel
you
like
to
we
get
can
rid of the other
remove
one.
trust.
Okay,
no one.
fine. Inequitable distribution of labor.
Because I feel like that captures more.
Yeah.
Yes, trusting no one is an unfortunate byproduct, but I feel like that filling it down. You're right. It's an inequitable distribution of labor due to group dynamics, due to the structure of the group project, or just due to some other social factor.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that we had on our notes was social loafing, which I think is a similar idea of if there's not strong roles or objectives in place, it's easier for people to just kind of be a free rider on the group and not contribute.
Absolutely.
And just because we've kind of got this theme, you're right. I will not remove it. I will. I don't know if you have to that or not.
I don't think I need.
Yeah, that's good.
An English instructor can chime in later on.
Yeah. Hey, Joan, welcome. Since you're just joined us, what we're doing right now is in the whiteboard, we are contributing problems with group projects, either from the student perspective or from the instructor perspective. When group projects go badly, what is it that goes badly? So that's what we're coming up with right now.
I think sometimes it's unclear to students what it is they're supposed to be doing. What is what is the end result that they're trying to get to, or what are the tasks to get there?
Yeah, so how would we say that? For learning objectives, for
Um,
outcomes?
yeah, I mean, you could certainly say that. That'd be the nice way of saying it.
Or students don't understand the purpose of the group project.
Just not sure. the purpose.
Again, kind of similar to when discussion boards go badly, it's if it feels like busy work, or it feels like the incorrect kind of assignment for what you're trying to accomplish. Yeah, that's good.
Thanks.
What else do we have on here?
I think it's hard sometimes for students to communicate with each other openly and honestly. Right? Oftentimes if students are just put in a group with people they've never met, and now they're expected to sort of negotiate a plan and.
Okay, so lack of communication.
Yeah, I think communication challenges maybe.
Yeah, challenges with communication seem to arise pretty commonly. How are we gonna meet? So I guess there's a logistic element there too, when you just talk about communication challenges. How are we gonna meet? What do we do when we meet? Like, there's a lot of this stuff, like I'm thinking about us doing this right now, like we planned for this tech talk and we had to kind of talk through our feelings about these projects, but that happened very organically because of the structure of our day and all of these different elements that combine to make sure that we have cohesion. In the classroom, you don't have those same kind of organic structures to ensure that a student can communicate effectively.
Especially if students aren't used to doing this, they don't already have that skill set, so may not know how to start up a group in that way. Communication challenges is good. I think similar to that is logistics challenges. That's related, but it's also a little bit different. Like,
Okay.
how do we schedule a meeting? How do we make sure everybody can attend at the same time? How do we track our work?
What tools are we using to communicate with each other?
Yeah. What tools? Let's see, what else do we have on our notes here? We had written down, students aren't completing something that they couldn't complete on their own. That's kind of related to purpose, or students unsure of what they need to accomplish, but I think it's distinct enough.
Oh, yeah, so, okay, so you're talking about like the actual product or the end result of the project is something that a student could have done
By themselves.
They didn't need to be in a group, so the group ends up being this kind of like additional load,
Yeah,
and
it
now
feels
I've got
like
to focus on that instead of the actual project.
Unnecessary overhead to something that I could have just gotten done much easier by myself.
Okay, I'm trying to think of a pithy way to do this. So got, yeah, the end, maybe outcome is not aligned with group work. Yeah, with group work, there we go.
Sure.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's certainly related to that, maybe the same, but just sometimes the complexity isn't great enough. So I guess that's another way of thinking about this.
Yeah,
You
it's
need
kind
to
of
have
feels like it might be its own element.
Yeah, a certain level of complexity in a group project that requires contributions from more than one person.
Yeah, contributions and collaboration. Another thing that we had on our notes was, could have been an email. Again, similar to like discussions, or, when we're, as a professional in academia, how often do you hear this meeting could have been an email? If the objectives of the meeting are not clear and the work is not aligned to a group setting, then why wasn't it just an email?
Yeah, I like that, because there's definitely a very clear connection to how we would design that. Yeah, you want to ensure that it is something that would require, or there's some mutual benefits that adds a purpose to being in the group, get buy-in, it gives value to the group work. I can see that being a big sticking point, especially from the student perspective, but also as an instructor, seeing all of those projects roll in and having to grade all of them, and they all kind of look the same, or they just don't feel like the students ever really got to the point you needed them to.
Yeah. going back to the trust no one example,
Yeah.
I think some related things are fairness in grading. Like the stress of your grade being contingent on someone else's work or effort.
Yeah, there's kind of like an element of justice almost in there.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
I feel like everybody's maybe been part of a group project where everybody had a collective grade and gosh, Nick was in my group and maybe I don't get along with Nick. Or maybe Nick had a bunch going on and couldn't actually be part of the project.
yeah,
Nick didn't do a lot.
yeah.
And then everybody else
Well,
either
that goes
suffers
in,
from that.
that goes in two directions, right? One is everyone suffers, everyone gets a worse grade because not everybody was pulling their weight. But the other one is that justice sense of Nick got an A that he didn't deserve.
There we go.
Because he wasn't contributing and we carried him. So I think those are like two different things that are kind of related.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is Joan, if you can hear me. The other is, how did I get in this group? How did you select me to be in this group?
Great point.
That is a good one. Yeah, I would just put that on there. How did I get in this group?
And, you know, to add to that, why am I in a group? Like, needing to know, how did I get in this group, but why am I working with a group instead of just doing this on my own?
Yeah, well, and again, you could probably break that into a couple different versions of that. One is a completely arbitrarily constructed group. The instructor pulled out names out of a hat or however they did it, and there's no sense of transparency for the students. The other side is you're just butting up with your friend, which can also not be a productive dynamic because then you're just goofing off with your buddy and not doing the work that you're supposed to do. So that can go badly in both directions.
Oh, yeah.
Let's see, what else do we want to make sure we got on here?
Nick, do you mind sliding out over just a little
Yeah,
bit?
let me,
Yeah, thank you.
here, I'll bring them all a little bit closer together. We already have quite a good list kind of growing. Kind of feels like we have 4 different separate.
Yeah, should we start organizing these out a little bit?
Maybe, I do want to make sure that we're not missing something big, like I'm imagining that, you know, we're talking about complexity, we're talking about outcome is not aligned with group work. I mean, one of the things that I feel like I struggle with either designing group work or being part of a group is not enough time. Like, it feels like this could go into two different directions, but like time for our group to actually build and understand how to work together. But also making sure there's not a pressure of time to get the project done, to not actually be able to, again, build that. And actually,
So let's just put time management on
a
there.
couple different places, but then we've got time management. But that can also be like, is the group work scaffolded appropriately? Like, we're meeting in this class, we don't have the benefit of being in an actual like environment where we would be doing group work, like in our professional environment or career, where it all has to happen really organically. As the instructor or as a member of the class, we would all probably benefit from progress checks, things that kind of help with the project management element, because that feels like that gets left off a lot of the time. And that would be like scaffolding so that you can achieve that higher level or higher order of work required within a group.
Well, that's a frustration for students, but it's also a frustration for the instructor. Like if the instructor, you set up the groups, you tell them what the group project is, but then if there's not proper scaffolding and not enough check-ins, then the due date comes around and one of two things are going to happen. Either you're going to have a ton of students messaging you in a panic. Oh, we don't know. We don't understand what we're doing. We don't get this. We ran out of time. We have all these questions. We don't know what to do. Or the other thing is a student group has just gone complete apocalypse now. They're out in the jungle. You don't know what they were doing. They come up with a completely off the wall submission that is not accomplishing what you wanted it to do. And it's too late because you didn't have time to check in with them.
And most likely think that they've nailed the project. Right?
Yeah,
Think they've done what they're supposed to do.
without feedback and check-ins, they might be very confident of what they're turning in, and it's just not what you wanted.
Yeah.
Well, how would we label these categories of challenges? We kind of had a list here before. Do these still make sense?
Well, I see a very clear like accountability element over on the far right.
Yes.
So I think that's just one huge category is accountability.
Very
Yeah, that's good.
sure.
Accountability is, I think, a huge challenge or pitfall for group projects for sure.
And that would have to be very implicitly structured.
Mhm.
So ensuring that that aligns with your outcomes for the project. It aligns with like what we might determine to be like professional practice. Like what does accountability look like in the field? Probably could ensure that that there's some structure that you can kind of lean on, because I feel like that this piece is probably the stickiest and probably the most difficult interaction to actually manage.
Yeah, so what would be some universal or mostly universal best practices for accountability? And we don't have time to go into great detail on this. We're gonna do that more next week when we show more specific examples of group project designs. But are there some axioms or some best practices?
Yeah, I think it's important for students to have clearly defined roles.
Mhm.
Or division of labor. Whether that's something that the instructor sort of builds out, or whether the students co-create that.
Mhm.
Check in with the instructor on that.
Yeah, so there's different ways you can accomplish that, but it has to be accomplished, or else you risk all of these accountability problems.
Yep. And this is Joan again, and very specific on grading on participation. Is it group? Is it individual? Is there going to be feedback on the group? That kind of stuff.
Yes,
And I think what you just said is also communicating exactly what the defined roles are, or how those roles.
yeah,
work.
there needs to be no ambiguity. Students need to know either know what roles they have, or they need to let you know what roles they have determined for themselves. And it needs to be very clearly communicated. How is this being graded? How is this being assessed? What comes down to your individual effort and what comes down to your group product at the end? Yeah, so communication and clearly defined roles, I think, are probably pretty universal best practices for good group projects. Okay, let's go on to one of the other clusters here.
So I think one of the purple ones that we're talking about, students being unsure of the purpose or outcome.
Mhm.
I feel like that touches on authenticity, the importance of authenticity, but I don't know that we fully like hashed that out in some of our kind
Yeah.
of post-its there, but
That was a note that we had when we were talking about this earlier, but that idea of if the group project is not authentically mirroring a real group project, whether it's in an industry or content area or career or something like that, then it doesn't feel authentic. It feels like it's misaligned. Students don't totally understand what's going on. They don't feel like this is a good use of their time. I think maybe that could have been an email, should maybe get shifted over towards authenticity, perhaps.
Yeah, absolutely. It feels.
Maybe same with not a high enough complexity to warrant group work.
Yes, yeah,
That's a
kind of
question of
all building
authenticity.
into authenticity.
and so I feel like Nick, that purple one, unsure of what they need to accomplish, might fit better over with like the project management scaffolding. Whereas the students are unsure of purpose of outcome of project, feels to me like that would fit really well with authenticity.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Well said.
So then I think there's maybe two parts to the authenticity. One is authentically mirroring professional practice. You know, what does a group project look like in this content area or this field or this career or this industry? The other part is how do group dynamics work in quote unquote the real world? When you are working on a project with professional peers, how does that group dynamic actually play out? Well, it's not the same as a crappy group project where each student just says, oh, well, I'll work on 3 slides and you work on 3 slides and then we'll be done. That's not how a real group project usually works out. There's usually brainstorming, there's more collaboration, there's maybe peer revision and review of saying, oh, I see the slide that you worked on. How does that compare to mine? How do they connect? Do they overlap? Are they redundant? And having that interaction, I think, is important.
Yeah, and certainly that negotiation of ideas. That's a
Negotiation
give
is
and
good
take.
word, yeah.
Yeah, that's important for an authentic
Yep.
interaction.
Okay, so looking at that purple cluster, I think the term we used before was just structure and support is kind of the overarching need there.
Yep. This is Joan. In one of I teach project management, and one of my things in my syllabus is, because it's a project that goes the whole quarter, is basically you can vote somebody off the island. So basically, if the team, 2 out of the 3 team members send me feedback about the person, I'll kick them off and make it do it individual, and then give them an appropriate grade because they didn't show up or whatever, but I give them some control to vote people off the island.
Gotcha. So that kind of falls under both structure and support and maybe accountability, because you're giving a structured procedure there. You're saying this is the correct procedure to handle a student who's not pulling their weight or is not responsive or is not participating the way that they need to.
Right, because it's such a long project. If it was a week, you couldn't do it, but it's, 6 or 7 weeks out of the quarter. It gives them enough time to know, hey, the person hasn't shown up 3 times, so,
Yeah, that's good. And again, clearly communicating what that process is as the instructor. This is, and I think, I don't know, it's a universal practice, but sometimes maybe that looks like a group contract for the project, either something that you as the instructor are providing or something that the groups are creating for themselves.
Right.
But that one may not be universal. That might make it sense in some projects and not in others.
Yeah, I also, because it's such a long project, I have them make a communication plan the first week. How are you going to communicate? Are you going to be this tool, that tool, text messages? I'm not, you have to use Canvas, but so that they kind of make a contract between themselves. This is the first way. And if people don't respond, the second plan B option is this type of, so that they kind of have it within their own group, an accountability for communication.
That's good. That's good. Well, so when we talked about this before, we kind of had 4 categories. Do we still think that there's a 4th category here, or do those maybe fall within?
I think it's worth talking about a 4th category of transparency. I think it can be a bit separated from these other 3. And I kind of think you and Joan kind of touched on it in what you were just commenting on, talking about being clear in your communication and being clear with students why they're doing that group project. We talked about that, I think, within some of these other ones, but
I think you're right. There's a distinction there of, are you transparent about your expectations? Are you transparent about what support you are providing? Because like transparency connects with each of those other 3 things. You have to be transparent about why this is authentic and why and how this is mirroring a real world example. You have to be transparent about your expectations and system of accountability. You have to be transparent about the structure of the project and the support that you're providing to students.
right, yeah, you can have structure and support, authenticity and accountability, but if you're not transparent about all that with your students, the
Right.
project's gonna flop.
Yeah.
So
You're right. No, that makes sense. And really that's kind of the 4 categories of best practices that we came up with when we were planning this, is for a group project to be successful. And the reason we're talking about this is we do believe that there is a lot of value in a good group project because it is an extremely authentic assignment. It's a very real thing that students will have to do when they're in their career, when they're in their industry or their field. They have to know how to work as a group. They have to know how to manage a project. So then, if you're going to do it well, it has to have clear structure and support. it has to be authentic, it has to include accountability, and it has to include transparency on all three of those other factors. And if you can do that, the hope is that avoids some of those big pitfalls and frustrations that students have with group projects, but also that instructors have with group projects.
Yeah.
And that takes us
Wow.
to 1:30.
You timed that final statement. quite
Yeah.
well.
So going forward, we're gonna have another session next week, and at that session, we're going to share probably 2 or 3 example group project designs. And show how those are organized and explained and scheduled and scaffolded. And hopefully tie them back to those 4 best practices and show what that looks like in practice, with a few different examples in different areas and maybe different scales and sizes of group projects, maybe a big one, maybe a small one. And hopefully that will be helpful to people as they think about their own group projects.
Well said.
We want to share our
Oh, yeah, we do.
quick little evaluation form for anybody that is attending. If you wanted to fill that out very quickly, I just posted the link in the chat. That just helps us know how we're doing.
And do you also post the links on YouTube?
You know, I don't always, just because it's out in the public and I worry about random people taking our survey, but
Maybe they might have some great things
they
to
might.
say.
Maybe we should think about that. Maybe that would be helpful.
Very strong feelings, Caleb, I'm
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. All right. I mean, that's about it for today. That's all we have time for. So
Yeah, unfortunately, because I feel like this topic can just keep kind of spiraling in a good way. Just
yeah,
because there's so many different avenues, but I think once we get to like concrete examples,
yeah.
we can show what this looks like. It's gonna hopefully, for those that might be struggling with group projects or even just trying to like elevate the practice and really rethink their process.
Yeah.
I think we'll be.
And this is Joan. I don't know. I thought in one of these you're going to do like tools, like how to use Canvas groups and how to maybe use other tools.
Yeah.
That would be
Yeah.
great as well.
Yeah, so right now we have a 3, maybe 4-part series here. This first one is like the theory, some best practices and some pitfalls. Next week, we're gonna be showing some specific example group project designs. And then the week after that, we'll be looking at some specific tools, both in Canvas and I think outside of Canvas, maybe mostly in Canvas that week.
Yeah,
Right.
depending on if we can get somebody kind of help us with the talk. 'Cause we
Yeah,
wanna Make
so
sure we
We
have
have
that support.
Leslie Dawson, it's gonna be.
That's right. That'll be our 4th week is Leslie from the IT department is going to come and talk about specifically the Microsoft Office suite that we and all of our students have access to and how some of those tools
Oh,
can
perfect.
support group projects and group work.
So this one will span.
Yeah, so that's kind of the sequence of events here for the next few weeks.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks for coming, Joan.
Thank you, we appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, I guess I'm going to end the live stream. Thanks for coming, everybody. Thanks for watching.
See ya.